everybody today. It is Thursday, October 12th at 2:30. I'm State Representative Tommy Vitolo. You're watching TV on TV here on Brookline Interactive Group. And unlike other shows where we film it in one take, pre-recorded, and then put it on the air at 2:30, today we're live. And so all mistakes are mine. I will do my best to not blunder live on TV. But we're doing the best we can. And the reason we're live is because of the events unfolding in Israel. We wanted to have as up to the minute a conversation as we could have. That conversation will be with Scott Gladstone, a Brookline resident, a friend, and a person who I will allow introduce himself and explain why he's worth hearing out. But first, before we get into the conversation with Scott, the news. We always start with the news, and we're going to try to get it right on the first pass. Here we go. United States President Joe Biden joined European leaders in standing with Israel and looking for ways to increase support. President Biden has denounced the attacks on Israel and pledged United States support for Israel in their fight against Hamas. Mexico has sent a note to the United States protesting Texas Governor Abbott's decision to enforce additional truck inspections at the border. And the U.S. economy added 336,000 jobs in September, while the unemployment rate remained at 3.8%. The jobs number is significantly higher than what was projected by officials. The White House sent a team this week to Massachusetts, who met with the Healey administration as well as federal and local officials to assess the shelter system and best practices in dealing with the influx of migrants. Governor Healey is preparing to send a housing bond bill to the legislature soon. It will feature more than 20 policy changes and looks to close the 200,000 unit housing gap that currently exists in the state. The Massachusetts House of Representatives has started hearing comments on a proposed gun bill. The Senate is working on their own proposal, which they are expected to introduce and get to the governor's desk before the end of the session. Brookline mail service continues to be slow, causing residents to miss important pieces of mail, including medication and bills. The United States Postal Service has hired new employees and are currently training them. The postmaster says they will continue to hire and should be in better shape going into the holiday season. The BU Bridge was closed over the weekend due to a fire at an encampment on the Cambridge side. Officials said the people living in the encampment were safe and are being assisted by the American Red Cross Massachusetts chapter. The USGA has announced that the country club will host 4 upcoming championships over the next 25 years, including the 2030 U.S. Girls Junior, the 2034 Amateur, the 2038 U.S. Open, and the 2045 U.S. Women's Open. That's the news. You'll notice there's no transition graphics because we're live. And so we are just going to, here we go. It's interview time. Scott Gladstone, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Tommy.
Scott, how are you doing? And I know that's hard right now. So just tell us how you're doing.
Yeah, thanks for asking. Let me just say that, and I don't think I'm just speaking for me. In fact, I know I'm not just speaking for me. Members of the Jewish community are in pain right now. This is all very personal. I can get into that a little later. I'm stressed. My wife is stressed. My kids are showing a lot of stress. It's hard for me even to watch the news anymore. My feed is filled with the first couple days. It was filled with people saying, "Have you seen this person? I haven't heard. No one's telling me anything. I don't know if they're dead or kidnapped or hurt or in a hospital too maimed to identify." I don't want to get too graphic on your show, Tommy. My family came here in 1913 from the Pale of Settlements. And we came escaping the pogroms, which were rampant in the former Russian Empire at that time. And we thankfully the gates of America were open then. They closed soon after. The gates of what was then Palestine and later became Israel were open for some, then closed, and then reopened when the state of Israel was declared, and they stayed open. So we understand trauma in our family. It's in our genes, and the people who are in Israel now, who we have personal relationships with, are experiencing that trauma, and they've just experienced a pogrom. In every detail, every historical detail has been reenacted, and it's we need everybody's understanding. We need people to reach out. I can't tell you how thankful I am to especially my non-Jewish friends, who don't, not to say, well, how was your weekend, and be brave. If they know that this was a hard weekend, and that we're having a hard time, and they've done exactly what you did, just to begin with, ask how we're doing and really listen and really care. It means a lot.
Scott, you and I have known each other for 15 years through town meeting and other local issues and activities. But I think it would be helpful to the viewers if you could explain the different layers of Jewish religious and cultural life you experience, and sort of the different experiences you bring to this conversation, so folks can get a good framing of the different experiences that work together.
Okay, well, I can give you a little bit of the Jewish side of my resume. I mean, beyond being a town meeting member in Brookline from Precinct 16 for over 20 years, I've been involved in Jewish communal life pretty much my entire adult life. I'm past president of Temple Emeth in South Brookline. I'm now also an active member at Congregation Kehilloth Israel, right on Harvard Street in Brookline. I'm a member of the board of the New England chapter of the American Jewish Committee, the AJC. I'm a board member for Camp Yavne. And I have a lot of connections to Israel. Many family members, many friends. My kids have all been to Israel numerous times for months at a time. I've been to Israel, for numerous times for not as long as my kids have been able to go. But like I say, I know the country, I know the people, and they are our friends and they are our family, literally our family. And that's probably true of most of the Jewish people that you'll encounter. And that's part of why this is so personal.
And Scott, I know you to be a remarkable person, but the sorts of things you just mentioned, one at a time, aren't particularly atypical for members of our community, right? You're kind of like a regular guy in this context. You're not remarkable in your experiences. Your experiences reflect the experiences of many American Jews who live in Brookline. Is that a fair statement?
I think that's very fair. It's I think some people make the mistake, who are not Jewish, and aren't, having grown up Jewishly adjacent. They make the mistake of thinking of Judaism as a religion in the same way that Christianity might be a religion, or certain, Christianity is a big umbrella, I understand, and it's maybe closer to Catholicism than other forms of Christianity in this respect. You can be an atheist and still consider yourself 100% Jewish. And I know those people, because Judaism is not just a religion, it is a religion. It's a people, it's an ethnicity, it's what we refer to as a nation. and it, just I mean, that was the best example. So you don't even have to believe in God for everybody to consider you Jewish. A lot of people in Brookline, you included, Tommy, might be considered honorary Jews, just because you immerse yourself in our culture, in our issues, in our values, and that's why I in particular count you as a friend, and we have many friends. The Jewish community has many friends in Brookline, Newton, the whole area. We had a solidarity rally on Monday after the end of the Jewish holiday, which Saturday was both Shabbat and a Jewish holiday, which in Israel ended Saturday night, and outside of Israel ended Sunday night. That's a confusing detail that we don't have to get into. But so then when the holiday was over, and then really observant Jewish people are allowed to use technology, it's interesting. So a lot of this horror was delayed for a lot of people. They were hearing snippets. People who get print newspapers still were seeing some things. People who have members of their congregation, this is in an observant congregation such as Young Israel or Chabad, there'll be members who use technology anyway. Their personal observance is different than their public observance. So people were hearing snippets, but the horror that was being shown to us on television and on our phones didn't actually wasn't experienced by a large segment of our community until Sunday night. So when the Monday rally at noon happened, it was still very fresh for a lot of people, and the fact that we got full-throated support. And when I say full-throated support, I mean calling out the atrocities that were being seen. We got it from the governor, from the mayor of Boston. We got it from our state treasurer, Deb Goldberg, was fantastic. We heard decent messaging from both of our senators, United States senators. Jake Auchincloss, our congressman, was passionate, as was Deb Goldberg. And members of the leaders of the Jewish community also spoke. But what I'm trying to say is that people like you and Billy McGuire, who represents Precinct 16 at the State House, and Cindy Cream, we're all there. And so this is what I want to say at this point, Tommy. There's a lot in the Israel-Palestine conflict that is confusing and subtle and debatable, where there's injustice and wrongs on both sides. There's power dynamics. It's a long history and it depends on when you start telling the history, and that's all again confusing and subtle. But every so often there's a moment of moral clarity, and this today is one of those days.
And Scott, I want to interrupt you for just a second.
Yeah.
We're going to talk about some details, and they're graphic and they're hard to listen to. And if this is a moment in time when you're not interested in that conversation, know that this is available on Brookline Interactive Group online, and you can watch it at some other time. If this is not the time for you, that's all right. Take a minute and transition to something else. But for some of us, now is a time, and I think it's important on my show to be clear and to be explicit, because it is real, and you can bet it's explicit on the ground. So I'm sorry to interrupt you, Scott. I'd love for you to sort of tell us what makes what happened on Saturday and what's happened since, to the best of your knowledge, different than what might be on TV once a month or once every few months, and drama in the Middle East. This is not that. Tell us about what this is, so that folks really understand this is a dramatic departure?
Well, that's a big task. I actually wasn't planning on doing that. If you think it's important, if you think people watching this haven't actually been watching the news, then I mean, I really don't want to give highlights. I mean,
Okay.
there are, if you know the history of pogroms, if you know the history of the death squads and the Holocaust, um, the the resonance is there. I mean, it's not even just the background. It's the actual. I mean, it's almost as if the terrorists had sought to recreate the darkest moments in Jewish history, uh, to down to the smallest detail. I'll try not to be graphic, but using gas as a mode of death, indiscriminate shooting, dismemberment. Um, the We're hearing reports of rape. Um, I mean, now that I'm going down this rabbit hole, I mean, the most shocking thing to me is the report of the child care center where children were found um, decapitated. I'll just use the formal word. Um, it's This is a level of depravity and um, uh, violations of the laws of war in the extreme that again we haven't seen since um, the Holocaust and the pogroms. Um, uh, Pregnant woman separated from her unborn baby in the most violent of ways. Um, this, I mean, how it's it makes me physically ill. I have to stop watching. I have to stop listening, and I would urge anyone out there who can't who's feeling reacting similarly to give yourself a break, and you don't have to subject yourself to it. If you're someone who is this is all completely foreign, this kind of feeling, um, I would ask you not to look away. I would actually ask you to lean in and become enraged because there's no other appropriate response. It's not a time for equivocation. Um, the Palestinian people have a right to live in safety and dignity. I believe in their own state. Um, that's my preference on it as a two-state solution, and it is the position of the American government. Um, this is in what's happening today uh, is not being perpetrated by the Palestinian people. It's being perpetrated by the Hamas regime in Gaza. This is an entity that was elected in 2006, but they once they came into office, there were a minority in the government from the Fatah movement, which is the movement that mostly makes up the Palestinian Authority. And those people were executed in a junta type of thing to consolidate power. And there's been no election since 2006. So, and it's a Islamic regime that imposes Sharia law. It is illegal to be a member of the LGBTQ community there. Uh, Very limited women's rights, no trials by jury, summary executions. Um, the people of Gaza are terrorized by their own government. It's not to say that their government there doesn't have support. It does. It had replaced a corrupt Palestinian Authority. Of course, now there's its own corruption in Hamas. It could have been the Riviera of the Middle East. They have a beautiful coastline. Israel had pulled out all the settlements in 2005. It was theirs to govern. It could have been a model for a solution of what would have worked in the West Bank. But instead of using the greenhouses and the factories that were left for their use for growing and for creating, unfortunately, this government, who has besieged its own people, have used the hundreds of millions of dollars from the international community to buy rockets and to embed them in hospitals and schools and in residential areas on purpose in order to use civilians as human shields, which makes it that much more difficult for Israel to respond. And how is Israel going to respond? It is trying to take out rocket launchers in Gaza. Something like 5,000 missiles have been shot into Israel since Saturday in the surprise attack. And the way they do it, have traditionally done it, is they have a lot of people's phone numbers. They call, they make phone calls, and they speak in Arabic, and they say, your building is going to be bombed in half an hour, get everybody out. And of course, Hamas militants, terrorists are going to also leave, but it's about bombing out the infrastructure. Sometimes they'll drop a smaller explosive that's called a knocking on the roof that will cause slight damage. But that's the alert that says that the next one is going to take out this building, and so you should leave. Hamas has a history of telling civilians not to leave. And sometimes when we see awful civilian casualties in Gaza, it's a result of that. But I don't want to take away from the fact that this response, which is happening and will be coming, is because Israel was attacked, and its civilians were attacked. A rave of 250 or so, well, I don't know how many hundreds of young people were at this rave in the desert, like the Cello, apparently, of southern Israel. And it was a peace conference, and there were people who are not Israelis, Europeans, who were there as peace activists. There were Bedouin families there. This is not just Jewish. When the terrorists came, they fired bullets indiscriminately, trying to kill as many people as they could. Whatever people they could get to close enough, they abducted, pulled into Gaza, being held hostages. I've heard numbers of 80 to 200 civilian hostages, including women with babies, small toddlers, infants, many teenagers from this concert. The bodies stacked up in tents in dining halls of kibbutz Be'eri, where there are out of 300 residents, I understand, 200 of them were executed. Again, it's a horror that we've only seen since the Holocaust, and in one day, more Jews died in this event than have perished in one day since the Holocaust. So that includes all of the wars that Israel has unfortunately had to have been involved in. Anyway, I'm sorry, that's a very long answer.
But I think it's important for people to really appreciate that it was a direct and deliberate attack on civilians who, as civilians in any other country, don't own the responsibility of their government's actions, don't own the responsibility of their nation's history. They're individuals. And it's just ghoulish. It's just ghastly. I want to bring it to Brookline, and I want to think about Brookline residents and what their experience has been over the past 4 or 5 days. I'm thinking about our Israeli residents. I'm thinking about the lots of different kinds of Jewish experiences embodied by people in Brookline. What are our friends and neighbors going through right now, and how are those experiences a little different? I ask that so we can support them the best we can.
Thanks for that question, Tommy. Of course, Israelis, and we have many of them, have the bulk of their family is in Israel, and they're in harm's way, whether they're in Jerusalem, Tel Aviv, or in the Gaza envelope, or in the northern border, where Hezbollah has been threatening with rockets already and a potential ground invasion. So the stress is there. Everyone who's Israeli, it's a very small country. Everybody knows somebody who is touched by, is a family member of, or is actually a person who's been murdered, injured, or kidnapped. And I'll talk about Jews who are non-Israelis in a moment. But let me tell you, well, all right, I'll jump to that. Well, I'm jumping back and forth. Let me tell a quick story because I know we're running short on time. This happened the day after the 50th anniversary of the surprise attack at the Yom Kippur War, 1973. The day after, perhaps because on the actual day, maybe they thought the alert would be up more. That was the opinion of a local rabbi I spoke to. So when that surprise attack happened, not everybody, but many were in synagogue praying and fasting all day. And so the story was repeated over and over again of a military officer coming into the synagogue, giving a list to the sexton, who would give it to the rabbi, and the rabbi would interrupt services and read the names of all of the young men and women who had to immediately leave, go get their uniform, report to duty. They were given permission to break their fast, and maybe a moment to hug their parents.
It's a lot.
To maybe not see them again.
It's a lot.
And that is happening today. That is what's happening today. Everyone in the Jewish community, Israeli or not, has friends and family living in Israel whose children are going to war.
Scott, to interrupt, there are Brookliners who, since Saturday, have flown to Israel to bury family members. Our friends and neighbors.
Yes, and I know many of them. Not only are they going to bury friends and family, which has to happen within 24 hours if possible, so it's very hard to get back in time, particularly when most of the American airlines are not flying to Israel right now. I'm also seeing plane loads of El Al planes filled with Israeli Americans flying back to Israel to put their uniforms on. So it's the horror is not over. Besides the fact that rockets continue to fly, dead people continue to be found, and people are still identifying what of the burned bodies belong to their family, or who might just be missing because they're in Gaza, where the last ping of the cell phone was heard. This is an ongoing trauma, and everyone needs to step up, including our institutions, the public schools, the colleges and universities, and make unwavering statements of support for the people who are going through this pain. The politics will come later. This is an acute situation that's ongoing, and we need your support and we need your comfort.
Scott, I want to thank you for coming on the show. I know this was a burden for you. I know it's something you believe in, but that doesn't make it easy. And I'm very grateful. Folks at home, we do have to wrap it up. I want to remind you to be alert to anti-Semitic remarks and be vigilant and speak up and push back and support. our
I mean,
friend.
that violence we know goes up when there's activity in the Middle East and Israel, and Israel defends itself. We know violence, anti-Semitic violence, goes way up, and the Brookline police are aware of that. But everybody needs to be on their guard. Thank you.
And I did speak with the chief today. Our officers are paying extra attention to our synagogues and our other places where we know our Jewish friends and neighbors are more likely to be. And we all need to just be there for each other. So thank you, Scott. Thank you, viewers. Please check in on your friends and ask how they're doing. You've been watching Brookline Interactive Group. I'm Tommy Vitolo, and we hope to see you next week. Thanks so much for watching.